Okay, everyone, it is 1 o'clock, the appointed hour for us to begin our council meeting on June the 28th of 2021. I note that we have all councillors in attendance as well as our staff members. We welcome participation from the listening audience, and our streaming is available for viewing as well as over with Mark Perry in helping us through Rogers TV. So we welcome everyone, and I will call this meeting to order and ask you all to join me in a moment of reflection. Thank you. At this time, I would ask if there's any disclosure of interest, pecuniary or otherwise, and noting that you may so declare at any time throughout the proceedings, should the need arise. With that, we'll move into, sorry, Deputy Mayor, I didn't see your hand there. For you, you have a declaration?
I do, Your Worship. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, on item number 8C, DEV 2021-33, for the reason that my husband was the real estate agent involved in the sale of that property.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And you'll have the form go to the clerk, will you? Thank you. All right, we'll move on then to announcements. Is there any announcements around the table? The virtual horseshoe today? Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Greenfield.
Your Worship, thank you. And two, but pretty related, and recognizing, and I know you'll be speaking to Canada Day, but just wanted to mention that the Rotary Club of Meaford will be announcing their Citizen of the Year at 10 a.m. on the Meaford Hall steps. And they do ask that people tune into that virtually through the live stream. And following that prestigious event will be the Chamber of Commerce, and they'll be making the announcements of their awards, business awards, and those related to volunteerism. So that all takes place at 10 a.m. on Canada Day. Thank you.
Thank you. And over to you, Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is on behalf of Lynn Fashionado, the staff at the Meaford Public Library. They're very happy to announce that the library on Wednesday, the 30th of June, at 10 o'clock, will be open to 25% capacity, and that is about 50 patrons that can attend at the library. If they prefer, you can still do the curbside thing, but I think a lot of people would like to get inside to our wonderful library. The only thing is, of course, social distancing is advised. So Wednesday at 10 o'clock, the library will be much more open than it has been. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greenfield, and thank you, Deputy Mayor, because that certainly was a great segue into our Canada Day activities that will happen this year. It will be virtual, in keeping with the health unit requirements, of course. It will be live streamed, and it will be somewhat with a little different focus this year, again, knowing that and being very much aware of the horrific events that have been uncovered in the past couple of weeks and days. with regard to our Indigenous families and the grief that they are suffering through at this time, and the discovery of the bodies of several children who have succumbed through the residential school program. This is a very sad state of affairs, of course. Our hearts are breaking with all of our Indigenous families who are connected, and for the horrific events that have precipitated this. So with that in mind, we want to show our solidarity with our Indigenous friends and neighbors in our community, and we will be continuing on with the Canada Day traditional flag raising ceremony, and as has been mentioned, the award presentation with somewhat heavy hearts this year, but they will proceed. Unfortunately, the fireworks have had to be canceled because of crowd control, and the festivities at our Annan and Lease situation and in Bognor will be canceled as well. But there still will be the traditional flag raising at 10 o'clock, as the Deputy Mayor mentioned, from the steps of Meaford Hall. It will be live streamed, and leading up to that, with the library being open the day before, there will be grab bags. Everyone is encouraged to pick up some grab bags for fun for the day to be had on Canada Day. There will be some pre-recorded music, local music to enjoy as the day progresses. And again, the live stream flag raising at 10 o'clock in the morning. We wish everyone a very safe and reflective Canada Day this year. We also have on June the 30th, we have a second dose vaccination clinic to be held at the Meaford St. Vincent Community Center for the patients who have been contacted of the doctors who work out of the Bumstead and the Thornbury clinics. We also have been offered further vaccinations. Dr. Arrow will be advocating on our behalf to have further vaccinations received in our community, and we will have further updates as we become more aware of what that timing will look like. What else have I got here? I think we have had several uptakes on incidences, COVID-19 incidences, particularly with the Delta variant that is causing some concern. So again, the call goes out to everyone, please, please get your vaccinations. It is very critically important that we have as many people as we can vaccinated so that we can stop the spread of this highly contagious Delta variant. And then to continue, wash your hands, wear a mask, and keep your distance when it is appropriate to stay clear of large groups, and enjoy family gatherings over the long weekend ahead of us. I think that's it for me, unless there's something that anyone else wants to share at this time. Okay, seeing that nothing, we will move on then to public participation. And again, this is always a highlight of the council meetings, where we welcome our community to participate in the business of the municipality with presentations, with delegations on items of interest on our agenda, and with public questions as well. We do have two presentations this afternoon, and the first one is regarding the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority, and I will welcome Scott Gregg to introduce, as the board chair of Grey Sauble Conservation Authority, to introduce Tim Lanthier, our speaker. Over to you, Scott.
Well, thank you, Mayor Klumpus, and thank you to council and to staff for the opportunity to be listened to today. My name is Scott Gregg. I'm an Owen Sound City Councillor and the current chair of the board for GSCA. And with me today is our CAO, Tim Lanthier, who's been with GSCA since 2006. He originally started in the planning department, became manager of conservation lands, and has been our CAO for the last year and a half approximately. He's had to work through challenges in the last year and a half, largely due to COVID, obviously, as well as alterations and modifications to the Conservation Authorities Act, and to the stresses of accommodating extremely large volumes of pedestrian and tourism traffic to our properties, which you are well aware of. So with that introduction, I'd like to acknowledge Tim here today to speak to the presentation before you. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Council. Thank you, Scott, for that introduction. What I'd like to talk to you about today is the upcoming changes to the Conservation Authorities Act. So recently, effective mid-December, early December last year, a suite of changes were applied to the Conservation Authorities Act and put into place, but several of them require regulations before the proclamation of those specific sections can move forward. So in mid-May, about a little over a month ago, the province of Ontario released a regulatory proposal consultation guide. And that's what I'd like to talk to you a little bit about today. If we could move to slide 3, please. So I'll give you a very brief update. And today's presentation is, it's definitely longer than a 10-minute presentation. So I'm going to try to keep it very high level and we'll move through the slides pretty quickly. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see a map that shows essentially the Grey Bruce area. The area that's shaded in green is Grey Sauble's watershed. So this extends from Lake Huron on the west side over to Town of the Blue Mountains, Grey Highlands on the east side, and down to Flesherton and Tara in the south end, and we encompass that whole section of Georgian Bay shoreline across. There's 8 member municipalities within our jurisdiction, and we have 11 board members that represent those municipalities. And so for Meaford, that's Councillor Greenfield and Councillor Vickers, who sit on our board of directors. On the right-hand side of the slide, you can see a general breakdown of Grey Sauble's budget. And you can see this is for 2021, but the variations are minimal year to year. So it's about 49% generated by our self-generated or grants, things of that nature. It's about 44% municipal levy. You can see a small blue piece of the pie, and that represents the money that Grey Sauble gets to do source water protection work. The very small gray piece of the pie is the money that the Conservation Authority gets from the province to do natural hazard related work. It's about 1% of our budget. So the reason I'm showing you this today is just to stress the fact that it's really a partnership, and what we're looking at here today is strengthening the partnership that exists between the Conservation Authority, Grey Sauble Conservation, and our member municipalities. Slide, please. So under these regulatory changes that are proposed, the province has broken it down into 4 main categories. So mandatory versus non-mandatory programs, transition plans and MOU timelines, community advisory boards, and Section 29 regulations. Slide, please. So what is mandatory? When the province recently changed the Conservation Authorities Act, they looked at the suite of programs that conservation authorities offer, and they deemed that some of these are mandatory, provincially mandatory, and other programs are not. So they identified that the programs and services that we provide for the risk of natural hazards, so these are things like our planning comments on natural hazards, the regulatory permits that we issue for development, flood forecasting and warning work that we do, floodplain mapping, those types of works that help keep our communities safe are those natural hazards items, and those have been identified as a mandatory program of the conservation authorities. A second one is the management of conservation authority owned and managed lands. So as you may be aware, Grey Sauble owns lands throughout the watershed, and we actually own about 29,000 acres of green space in Grey and Bruce counties. Recent analysis of the people coming to these properties suggests that we're seeing over 300,000 people a year visiting these properties. So one thing that I do want to highlight is that although management of conservation authority owned lands is considered a mandatory program, the province has explicitly stated that the recreational and educational uses that come along with these properties and these programs are not considered mandatory. So for Grey Sauble, this is a huge concern because, like I said, we see over 300,000 people a year at our properties. They're coming whether we want them there or not. but outdoor recreational tourism is one of the #1 drivers of tourism in Grey and Bruce counties. And I feel like Sauble is an integral part of that outdoor recreational tourism. We need the basic infrastructure in place, the trails, the parking, the washrooms, to accommodate these visitors when they come. So if you're talking to AMO, if you're talking to your provincial representative, I encourage you to stress the importance of including those recreational uses as mandatory. The third item that's been identified as a mandatory program is source water protection. So currently this program is funded 100% by the province. The work that's being proposed through the regulatory changes is very, very similar to the work that we do today in this program area. One thing I would highlight is with the changes to the Conservation Authorities Act, there's an inclusion in the Act now to levy for this program area from both our member municipalities and specified municipalities. So those are the municipalities that fall into Saugeen Valley's watershed and North Bruce Peninsula. At this point, we keep asking the province to maintain the funding, and there's no suggestion right now that they're not going to maintain that funding. But I think it's important that it's on your radar as councillors that the stage has been set for that funding to, in the future, be moved to municipal levy. And I think that's an important thing to know so that, again, we can keep pushing through Conservation Ontario, through AMO, to make sure that the province keeps paying that portion of the pie. Two other items that have been added that are new are a core watershed-based resource management strategy. And the concept with this strategy is that it would take all of our mandatory programs and develop an overarching watershed-based strategy. In the province's word, this is intended to provide an integrated planning process with a longer-term perspective. So this is a bit of a different take on what we do now, and we'll have to wait and see what this actually means, what the details are, what's required from us to do this. The water quality and quantity monitoring is something we currently do under a partnership with the ministry. It's in kind, so we provide the staff time, they provide the financial resources for the lab work. This is now being listed as mandatory. Slide, please. So by default, everything else that conservation authorities do is non-mandatory. So non-mandatory has been broken into two subcategories, and one is municipal service agreements. So the relevant example for Meaford would be the planning service agreements that we have with the municipality, whereby we comment on stormwater management and natural heritage items. Another example is the risk management work that we do for our member municipalities as the other half of the source water protection program. Slide, please. So all of our other programs, so education, forest management, stewardship work, those are non-mandatory programs that are considered to be other programs and services provided by a conservation authority. So where this starts to make a difference to you as a municipality and to our relationship with each other is that under the current levy structure, our board of directors decides on the suite of programs that we have. We develop a budget, and a portion of that budget consists of municipal levy dollars, as I showed you at the beginning of the presentation. That municipal levy portion is allocated across those suite of programs as necessary to maintain those programs. And our budget lays out what that looks like. Slide, please. Under the new levy structure, with the new changes to the Conservation Authorities Act and the new regulations, only those mandatory programs will by default receive municipal levy. We'll require MOUs with each of our municipal partners for any of the non-mandatory programs that we offer if they require levy to run them. So currently with our budget, our forestry program runs independent of levy. It's a self-supporting program. Our education program currently runs independent of levy, but stewardship requires levy, and some of our other program areas do as well. So this is where it's going to start to be a bit of a new regime between the municipalities and the conservation authorities as we develop MOUs or agreements to hammer out what that cost is and where that money's going. So ideally, the way I see this going, and the discussion that we'll need to have again later in the year, is that the Conservation Authority continues to provide the same suite of programs for the same levy dollar amount. And we just put agreements in place to make sure that that carries on. Slide, please. So at a very high level, this is a breakdown of Grey Sauble's program areas. And you can see on the left-hand side of the slide, it's predominantly natural hazard related items and source water protection. On the left middle side of the slide, where we're into the non-mandatory programs, the risk management work that we do is very clearly a municipal service agreement. Forestry and stewardship are very clearly other programs and services, but there's a whole suite of programs that we offer that fall in the middle. And this is where it's going to get complicated in terms of teasing these out, because in some cases that program is one person. So it's really, really important that we maintain the capacity in these programs such that we have longevity for staff and longevity for those programs and community services that we offer. Slide, please. So in terms of moving forward, the province is asking or requiring that conservation authorities develop transition plans to say how we get from the way we budget today to the way we're going to budget in a year and a half from now. These transition plans will be developed in consultation with yourselves and with your senior staff. And what we're going to be required to do is to identify all of our program and service areas, to identify how each of those programs and service areas are funded, and to identify how we're going to develop the agreements that will take us into where we need to be in 2023. So currently the deadline for these transition plans is the end of this year. This causes us a little bit of concern, not in terms of doing the transition plan, but just because we haven't actually seen the regulations yet, and there are still another set of regulations yet to come, and we're, in July this week. So the time is shrinking, and the material, we don't know what the target is that we're aiming at right now. Once the transition plans are in place and we start moving forward next year with your municipal councils and with senior staff, we're going to have these MOUs developed by the end of 2022. More realistically, because of municipal election, because of development of budget for everyone, we're more likely to need to have these in place by this time next year so that your staff can develop their budgets appropriately, and so that you as counselors in place right now can make the decisions on these MOUs, and we're not into a lame duck situation. Slide, please. Two of the other items that were mentioned as are the main areas of this regulatory consultation guide, I won't go into great detail on. One is a community advisory board. And so currently our board of directors is made up of municipal councillors exclusively. So there is representation of the public on them. And conservation authorities have always had the ability to strike advisory boards if we saw fit, or if the board sees fit. Under the changes to the regulation and the changes to the act, we'll be required to strike community advisory boards. Some of the items defining these boards will be prescribed by the province. Others will be developed through a terms of reference developed by our board of directors. It's intended that this will be a more direct conduit from the broader public sector right to the board of directors. And as we work through seeing the regulations and working with the ministry, we'll have a better sense of what this looks like and what it means. And we'll make sure that we do what we can to make sure there's no duplication or wasted effort on this part. Slide, please. Slide. And slide, please. So the changes to Section 29 regulation. Section 29 is the piece of the legislation that deals specifically with properties that we own. So these are things like getting a permit for parking, getting a permit for camping, keeping your dog on a leash. Currently, there are 36 different regulations, one for each conservation authority. The goal here is that the minister is just going to consolidate these into one, and that's the only real change we're aware of there. Slide, please. So as we were talking, I mentioned a couple of concerns that we have. Overall, no huge concerns. Predominantly, they are timelines. Given the lateness of the data or the information coming out for municipalities and for conservation authorities, we feel that the timelines aren't really workable. We'll do it if we have to, but it doesn't give time for that really meaningful consultation. The exclusion of recreational uses from conservation authority land management is, it's quite frankly, it's not acceptable. It's such an important program area, and it's so important not only to Grey Sauble as a conservation authority, but to our member municipalities as one of the tourism drivers for the area. that we really feel that this needs to be covered. And the final thing is just with several new items being raised through the regulations, we do have concerns about costs and staff resources to make sure that we can continue to provide the level of service that we provide today and to provide the new work that's going to be required under these regulations. Slide, please. In terms of next steps, the ERO posting on this closed yesterday. So the Conservation Authority, Grace Sauble, has provided comments directly to the province. Conservation Ontario has as well. Several municipalities have as well. So we've been making an effort to get out to talk to municipal councils, to meet with senior staff, and to get the discussion started. Because with these transition plans being needed by the end of the year, we'll have to keep talking over the course of the year. And we wanted to sort of break the ground on that so that when the rubber really hits the road, it's not something new. So we will be preparing those transition plans by the end of the year, unless we can get the extension that we've asked for. We'll be looking to negotiate, draft, and execute agreements with each of our member municipalities by the end of next year, or like I said, more likely the middle of next year. And we'll be seeking clarity from the ministry on some of the new items that will be required of conservation authorities. Slide, please. Slide, please. So this regulatory consultation guide that's been released is phase 1. We expect to see phase 2 sometime in the next few months. And phase 2 will be the levy regulation that will define how that levy works in the future. And the government has alluded to the fact that there will be some program areas within the authority, corporate service type things, IT, fleet, that will be encompassed as operating costs or required for the operation of the corporation. So that will come out in phase 2. And ultimately, we're going to need to see phase 2 to help us develop these transition plans. Slide, please. So that's at a very high level, very briefly, the changes that are being presented. It is going to require a lot of back and forth between ourselves and yourselves as council, as well as your senior staff. And with that, Madam Mayor, through you, I would welcome any discussion or questions that council may have.
Well, thank you, Tim. You did that very well with just a little over your 10 minutes, but we appreciate the brevity, but also the high level discussion on this. I will open it up to any questions from council. If anyone has a comment or a question for you. I know that the work that you do is so critical in terms of tourism and also in terms of effective management of planning matters that we have as well. So we greatly value the services of Grace Sauble Conservation Authority, and I know how busy it was because I was out visiting you yesterday, and it was so busy I turned around and I'll go another day.
Yeah.
Rob, do you have a comment or a question?
I'll just add to Tim's presentation that him and I did talk about 3 weeks ago, so that dialogue is occurring now. This was part of that process that would happen. With regard to the comments, the county CAOs actually worked with the county in submitting comments through them. I thought collectively it was better if we went that way, and we participated in providing our comments through them. So I just wanted to update council is what we've been doing in the meantime as well. So.
Thank you very much, Rob. And again, thank you. I see a question from Councillor Kentner.
Thank you, through your worship. Tim, I just wondered if we are, really quite different compared to the other conservation authorities across the province in terms of the interrelationship of your programming and our tourism industry. I get the feeling, for example, that it probably doesn't matter a hill of beans once you get closer to the GTA. But for us here, at the base of the Bruce, it's pretty important.
Please go ahead, Tim.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. I think the green spaces continue to be vitally important across the province for all people living in Ontario. I think the difference when we get up here is that the green spaces in, say, the GTA are a local escape from the urban the urban areas, for lack of a better term. Up here, though, it's a more of an escape from those urban areas, and really it becomes a driver for us. People are coming up here to see our green spaces, not just those owned by Grey Sauble, but to get out into smaller rural communities, to get out on the lake, to go up the Bruce and see what's happening at the national parks. I think collectively, though, that is what's bringing people to our area, and it's so important.
Thank you for that. Well, I see no further questions for you today, gentlemen, so I will thank you very much for coming, and best of luck with the changes, and we'll be in touch still.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your time today.
Bye now. Our second presentation this afternoon is from Tom Thwaits with regard to a big canoe project. And we'll welcome Tom.
Hello. Thank you, Madam Mayor and councillors, for having me, welcoming me to the meeting today. My goal today is to give you a general overview of Big Canoe Project's operations for the coming summer, and with those operations in mind, to ask for your support in a variety of different ways, which I'll get to at the end of the presentation. First of all, our mission as the Big Canoe Project, we are a nonprofit social enterprise incorporated in the province of Ontario. And as such, our mission is to make big water paddling accessible to everyone, to celebrate the cultural diversity of Canada's past, present, and future, and to build environmental literacy by providing opportunities to participate in citizen science initiatives. I also want to thank Mr. Tim Lanthier for providing such perfect segues, as in talking about the pressures on our land natural resources and the 300,000 visitors. So looking at the Big Canoe Project as possibly a bit of a release valve for taking some of that pressure off of land properties and getting people offshore. And also talking about just generally how important outdoor tourism opportunities are like this to the tourism economy locally. Next slide, please. First of all, I'll start with the Meaford Day Camp, not only because it's starting next week and I'm very excited about it, but also because we're offering it through the municipality, and so all the registration is done through Meaford Parks and Rec. We've sold out our first roster of day camp, and we've got 10 participants. And generally what we'll be doing out there, as well as the water quality testing and coastal observations, kids will be getting a sense of how to operate the big canoe, how to spin it around circles, how to jump out of it, get back in, how to do a self-rescue, and as well as games. The whole camp will boil down to essentially beach hopping. And so in that sense, the local infrastructure and the prioritization that I see coming from the municipality in terms of keeping and maintaining water access in a very organized way, whether it's Centerville Park or St. Vincent Park, or we're spoiled for beaches, and so Big Canoe Project is taking full advantage of that. Next slide, please. We're also offering tours starting from the Meaford Harbour. Also, our day camp starts from the harbour as well. People are encouraged to book either an hour and a half round trip tour to the Claybanks and back, or a 2.5 hour round trip to Christie Beach. It's important to note that when we're talking about going to Christie Beach, we're also talking about making use of the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority facilities there. So whether it's the bathrooms or the pavilion, so a general, we very much appreciate not only the infrastructure that the town provides in terms of access to beaches and say even garbage collection when we get there, because we're always picking up garbage as we're paddling along. And that being said, also the infrastructure of the harbor itself in terms of parking for our clients and access to washrooms before we set out in the water. In terms of what it says at the bottom there with bookings online via our website, that is pending. At this point, we're doing bookings via email and processing everything by e-transfer, but we have a website that is just waiting in the wings. We're going to be able to process payments through and bookings through. Also, it's worth noting that we're on Airbnb, and there's a program on Airbnb called Airbnb Experiences. And so anyone making Airbnb bookings in this area also get notified for experiences that are available to them in this area, one of which would be the Canoe project. Next slide, please. Also, this is very much still in the works. Where Emma Smith and I will have this nailed out within probably the next 2 weeks. We've teamed up with Meaford Parks and Rec to help them spend a CPRA, that's the Canadian Parks and Rec Association, grant. The grant is for women and girls, and the grant is for enough money that it would offer, we'd be able to offer a free evening paddle. So that's an hour-and-a-half paddle every week from starting July into the end of September. 10 participants per tour, so we'd be able to do 12 tours. That's a reach of to 120 possible participants. So we're very excited about this this project. Next slide, please. As a nonprofit, I mentioned it at the beginning, just briefly about citizen science. What we're constantly engaged in doing, and this is with our day camps, our tours, and our weekly paddles, we're working with Water Rangers, which is another nonprofit, and they provided us with water quality testing kits. And so using those water quality testing kits, we're taking weekly, or if not daily, readings on pH, hardness, oxygen, conductivity. Conductivity is an interesting one because there gives you a sense of the presence of heavy metals in water. So the more conductive the water is, the more heavy metals are in there. The temperature of the water, the clarity, and the alkalinity. It's also worth noting that not only does Water Rangers provide us with the ability to collect and take these measurements, but they also have a really easy way of sharing our findings. And so Big Canoe Project is on the Water Rangers app, and if you go on there onto that app and search Big Canoe Project, you can find all our water quality readings so far for Big Head Harbour. We're not the only ones doing these water quality tests for the harbour, but you'll see data on there that goes back to, I think, in the beginning of April probably is when we started. On the other side, this is with the Coast Watchers program is something we're involved in. The Lake Huron Centre for Coastal Conservation, which is out of Goderich. And that amounts to, for us, every Thursday afternoon, going down to Raper Park and taking weekly readings on wind and wave and temperature, water temperature, and also human and natural presence on the beach. So we're not only counting how many birds we see, we're also counting how many people, whether we see motorized or non-motorized activity on the water, major erosion issues. So all that is being reported to Lake Huron Centre for Coastal Conservation now, and it drives their I'm trying to think of the right word. Their projects as a nonprofit, mainly working as a lobby agency and as a bridge to local conservation authorities, all the way down to the Maitland border. They're also a bi-national operation, and so it just gives them more data to work with, because when you think of we're so used to think about Georgian Bay as its own unique little thing, but Georgian Bay is one small part of the Michigan-Huron Basin, which is one interconnected water system, whereas Lake Superior is controlled by one dam, and Lake Ontario and Lake Erie are very much controlled in and of themselves, whereas Michigan Huron, whatever's happening at the bottom of Lake Michigan is also happening here. We also worked with them to collect water samples from Meaford, Collingwood, and Wasaga Beach at the beginning and end of the paddling season, and those will be analyzed for the presence of microplastics. It's important to note that Lake Huron Center for Coastal Conservation they work with a lot of universities and on both sides of the border, as well as government, like Climate Change Canada. But as part of one of the studies, they looked at the presence of microplastics in core samples from the bottom of Georgian Bay, and discovered that one of the highest concentrations is at the bottom of Nottawasaga Bay. It's actually almost like a well for microplastics, and so that all those microplastics are just sitting there in the bottom in the sediment undisturbed, and so it's worth thinking about, well, what would happen if you were to disturb those. Next slide, please. So going from the citizen science we're engaged in right now to some potential citizen science that we look forward to possibly doing in the case of the sea bins in the near future in Thornbury, and hopefully one day in Meaford, and then long term possibly with Swim Drink Fish, which is a nonprofit out of Toronto, setting up a community testing hub. To start with sea bins, you might have seen them in Collingwood or Thornbury harbors. They're attached to they're bolted onto a dock, and they're essentially a trash vacuum that sits on the top of the water and sucks in as much plastic as possible, floating detritus from around the harbor. And at the end, anytime the trash can gets filled, the harbor staff weigh it, and so that gets collected as data by the University of Toronto trash team, and around here groups like Georgian Bay Forever and Great Lakes Plastic Cleanup. At this point, Thornbury Harbour has 2, and Collingwood Harbour has 5, and that ongoing work is happening in terms of the recording of not only the weight of trash that's pulled out of the harbor, but also 5 times a season, somebody goes in and actually sifts through the trash and says, all right, counts how many plastic straws and counts how many bottles, and that drives, in the case of Georgian Bay Forever, it drives their lobbying efforts, and which amount to, for example, the ban on polystyrene foam, the use of polystyrene foam in docks, and the decision to ban plastic bags and plastic straws. So it helps them prioritize which things need to be tackled first. This is on the other side of the slide, looking at Swim Drink Fish and the community testing hub. This is much more long range because of the amount of money it would take to set up. It doesn't take a lot of space. This could be done out of like the countertop and the new school. It doesn't take a whole lot of space, but the water samples for E. coli have to be sampled within an hour of having been collected. And so if there's for example, Swim Drink Fish has a community testing hub down in Toronto that they use for their Toronto beaches and their Safe Beaches program. But obviously it's too far away from us to be able to get accurate readings on E. coli for around here. So there's a possibility to work with them to set up a community testing hub that would serve Meaford, and within an hour and a half drive from around Meaford. Next slide, please. So with all those operations in mind and everything we're we're excited to bring to the municipality. What we're asking, what the Canoe project is asking for, is for to waive our boat launch fee for this summer and future seasons. At this point, because we're offering tours in Meaford, Collingwood, Owen Sound, and on Lake Eugenia, we don't have a plan to leave the Canoe overnight in Meaford Harbour for any length of time, other than, say, I can imagine leaving it down in the harbour for the length of our day camp, so the July 5th to 9th. But longer term, it would really help to have that boat launch. Future slip fees. This season, we weren't able to get dock space. Our boat is 29 feet long, and for us, the side of the harbor that would work best would be the riverside, because it enables us to take clients out, get settled into the canoe, going up and down the river first before venturing out onto the bay. There's a lot less traffic on that side coming in and out of the harbor, as opposed to, say, coming in from the boat launch.
Please.
Log is $1,885. And finally, for example, we're putting together well, I've sent in a letter of intent in order to apply to the Community Foundation's capital grant in September. But as a nonprofit, we cannot actually apply to that, to grants like that, without a qualified donee. And a qualified donee is essentially it's a way of sponsoring Big Canoe Project's grant applications. And in terms of the role and responsibility of a qualified donee, it boils down to the funds being siphoned through the municipality to the Big Canoe Project. And so quite often when, give me a second.
Why is there tape there?
Quite often when the way it works with a qualified donee signing off for a nonprofit is the qualified donee will charge a 10% fee, and that 10% fee will be added to the grant application in order to pay for the administration costs of siphoning that, of having that money flow through the municipality. So a qualified donee for us can be a municipality, it could be a university or post-secondary institution. It could also be other registered charities. So we're putting feelers out to find qualified donees. We've worked with Elephant Thoughts in the past. They've acted as a qualified donee for us for a different community foundations grant. But it'd be very helpful to have as many different qualified donees to call on as possible, because, for example, there are some grants we wanted to ask Elephant Thoughts to act as a qualified donee for us, but registered charities cannot act as a qualified donee if they're making an application to the same grant. So if they're already making an application to capital grants, then they can act as a sponsor for us to apply to that same capital grant, because essentially they'd be making two applications to the same grant. So having a different options for us to call upon in terms of qualified donees would be extremely helpful. I'd like to thank you for your attention and the opportunity to present today, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Tom. Very interesting project, and of course, all seen the Big Canoe and its resting place, and wondered what it's all about. So I thank you for your presentation today. We are running a little short of time, but I will ask Council if there are any quick questions for you as we move on. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship, and Tom, I thank you for your presentation, and I appreciate it because I know you've worked really hard to build awareness and get this project off the ground. So thank you for that. And I know Darcy isn't with us today, but I was just curious to know what funds were remaining in council's community budget. Matt, thank you.
Hello, Council, and through you, Madam Mayor. I don't have the number in front of me, but I believe it's somewhere in the region of $1,500 per year that's currently unallocated.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you for that, Matt. Yes.
Right. Seeing no further questions from council, I will thank you very much, Tom, for your presentation and for your passion. It's great to see, and I wish you the best of luck with this project. We will be chatting soon. Thank you for coming. All right, we'll move on then. We have no deputations on agenda items, but we do have a public question, and we'll welcome Victoria Yeh.
Thank you, Mayor Compass. Thank you, Council, for having me today. On May 31st, nearly a month ago, I addressed Council on the issue of emergency access at Gates of Kent. I expressed some concern that no engineer to date has reviewed and stamped an amended site plan, and that the bollard manufacturer confirmed that the bollards installed at the direction of the municipality were not designed for emergency access and can damage emergency vehicles. While I've not received any real update or answers on my questions, I do have updates to share with you. I've been recently made aware of a case precedent in Midland that nearly mirrors the situation at Gates of Kent, notably creating dead-end fire lane branches off of another dead-end fire lane was found by the Building Code Commission, the Midland Fire Chief, and the Midland Building Official to be contrary to Ontario Building Code. It was further established that midpoint turnarounds could not be relied upon for OBC conformity, and yet this erroneous rationale is exactly what Meaford is advocating at the Gates of Kent. Last month, I also informed you that my family was forced to move due to our concern that emergency access could be delayed because of the bollards. And not even a week went by after we moved that the exact scenario we've been warning you about for 4 months happened. A resident at the Gates of Kent at the Center Street side of the complex was in medical distress and called an ambulance. That ambulance arrived at Center Street, slowed to examine the bollards and decided what to do next, then rerouted to Union Street. That is a 4-minute drive at speed limit, perhaps optimistically a 3-minute drive by a speeding ambulance. Had that been a cardiac event, that could have been a 30 to 40% reduction in that person's survival. This is a large, vulnerable population, and serious medical emergencies can happen there at any moment. How much more real harm are you going to allow to happen before acting? And it's very distressing to see my municipality embracing so much liability. We are at a standstill where staff says they can't force change, and yet the condo is unable to enact any change either because the installation of the bollards and the closure of Center Street was directed by this council. So that means any change to the situation must be initiated by the municipality. If someone builds a deck without a safety railing, the municipality has the power to force the homeowner to build one. This is no different. It's your responsibility to understand and to enforce Ontario Building Code compliance and to ensure that designs have been properly reviewed and approved by engineers and building officials. At the GOC, this due diligence has not occurred. So I ask again, how much longer will it take to realize that these bollards are only there because the municipality directed their misguided installation, that it is absolutely in the municipality's power and responsibility to revoke that requirement, and how much more real harm are we going to allow to happen before acting?
Thank you for your question, Ms. Yeh. And I'm going to ask Rob if you want to respond to this at this stage, because it is my understanding that the redirection of the EMS was at their error, not because of the bollards. So I think that that to be categorizing that as a risk, it certainly is a risk, but that's a risk that it comes with the EMS mapping and so on. So I thank you for your comment and your questions. Rob, do you want to add to anything to this?
Just with regard to the EMS, they were aware of the situation, and it shouldn't have happened based on provisions that they were put in place that they're not supposed to be going to that exit. I agree that it wasn't supposed to happen and did create a delay, but I can't speak to anything more on the EMS. Just from our perspective, we have indicated that we're having a legal review, and that includes the Ontario Building Code component as well. I did receive some initial correspondence this past weekend with some further questions of me. I am corresponding with our lawyer, and we'll continue to work on this. The only thing I will note is that we, the municipality, approved or accepted the change by the installation of the bollards. We did not order it. I just wanted that clarified from a process point of view. But I continue to work, as per the email that I sent to Victoria and Trevor on Friday, that I continue to review it and work through our ability to implement the change that they speak of. So,
thank you for that, Rob. And thank you again, Victoria, for your question. We'll move on now to council inquiries. If there's anything from council for staff. Councillor Kentner and Deputy Mayor and Councillor Bell.
Thank you, and through your worship, I guess a question for Rob. It's really confusing for councillors to sort out, all of the facts, material facts to do with the bollards installed about 5 months ago at the Centre Street entrance to Gates of Kent. So I know we've been waiting for direction from our solicitor. Can you just maybe explain, for council's benefit, just how the Ontario Building Code fits into this situation and sort of where we do stand?
Yeah, through your worship. So as per the email that I copied on council, it's always been our understanding that what happened at the Gates of Kent did comply with the Ontario Building Code. What the provision is that when you get a dead end street beyond 90 meters, that you have to provide some sort of turnaround. In this case, the component of Russet Drive, as it extends beyond the last road, is less than the 90 meters. So that last road can function as the turnaround. That's been my understanding historically. It is being reviewed as per that case. And actually our solicitor has a lawyer who is also a fire chief and very much familiar with the Ontario Building Code, and will be reviewing that. That will be one of, if there is non-compliance with the Ontario Building Code based on that review, then there can be the order that we can invoke the change. But we want to make sure that that our lawyer supports our ability to order that on the go forward. So that's all currently being reviewed at this time.
Okay. Supplement, are you all right with that, Councillor Kentner?
Yes, I am just going on record that I'm disappointed in our communications with those in the Gates of Kent who are concerned about this issue. It seems that letters have been written to staff, including the fire chief, and we're told anyway, or read that they have not been responded to, and just we're putting a lot of priority on improving communications as part of this council's priorities, and it just is frustrating that it is even at this late date that we really don't even have a clear picture for council on whether we are going to be, which side of this argument we are going to fall on.
Duly noted. Deputy Mayor.
Your worship, thank you. And a question again from Mr. Armstrong. In relation to the post office in Wagner, and we know the home has been sold that currently houses the post office, and the hope of the residents that at least a temporary solution can be situated at Wagner Hall, perhaps. And I just wondered if you could provide us an update of that.
Yes, through your worship. Yeah, through your worship. So Rod Willis has been working with the Wagner Hall Committee and looking at options with regard to the hall. We are looking at whether it's an addition, a temporary building, or possibly using a component of Bogner Hall for that. Obviously, there's an immediate need, but then a more long-term need that the committee is looking at. So I know that I spoke to Rod again today, and he's waiting for some pricing on different options, and then we'll be getting back in touch with the committee and working with them.
Thanks for that, Rob. And over to you, Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I asked this question, and I will direct it towards Mr. Armstrong. At our last meeting at the BIA, I asked this question because they wanted me to get back with the answer, and I'm sure other people want to know the answer to this also. Glad to see that the work is proceeding at the former Smith's Tires location, and we're heading towards having a new parking facility. And the question is asked, will there be overnight parking at that new lot? Thank you.
Through your worship, that's something that we will need to review on whether the overnight parking. Obviously, we have to limit areas of overnight parking because of winter maintenance. So we'll be reviewing the functional aspects, and it might even be a case that the overnight parking moves to Smith Tire and removed from Market Square. But we'll evaluate that as we work on the detailed design of that property.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Bartley, then Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I actually have two questions. First one would be to Rob Armstrong. Rob, if we get the okay from the lawyer that the bollards can come down on Gates of Kent, does council have to bring a motion forward to have that done, or will staff bring that forward?
Through the worship, we will have to reach out to the developer and discuss. Obviously, those bollards were put up in place for a reason that allowed them to remove a sidewalk. So we would have to get back in touch with them and explore what the alternative measures of ensuring safety within the development of pedestrians walking, which was the initial intent of putting those bollards up. So we'll have to explore that with developers. If we can come to an agreement on what those site plan amendments would be, then that would come back to council, but we would work with the condo board and the developer on the alternative should they be required to come down.
But could the bollards come down before we do sidewalks or something in there, or do the bollards have to stay till the work is done?
The current agreement is that the bollards are to be there, so we would need to amend the agreement, and that would include what alternates would be in place.
Okay, thank you. I have a second one. Do you want me to wait to the end, Madam Mayor?
Oh, go ahead with your second one.
Thank you. And this, I guess this would be to the clerk, Matt, if you're there. On June 14th, I was a person that voted against Councillor Greenfield's motion to do something with the speed limits on Miller Street. And I have had to change of heart, and I would like to bring that back. How do we do that?
Motion.
You challenge me regularly, Council, with these technical ones. We can ask for reconsideration. The person that needs to ask for reconsideration is always somebody who voted in the successful side of things. So, Councillor Bartley, that would apply to you. That would then need a 2/3 majority of council, and then that would come back to the next meeting. The way that we would do that will be through the notice of motion section later on today. Councillor Kentner, you could at that stage then, sorry, Councillor Bartley, you could at that stage ask for a reconsideration of that motion. We debate and take the vote on whether to reconsider, and then the motion would come back at the next meeting, also under councillor motions.
So that would be at the end of today's meeting in motions. Is that correct? Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. Before I begin, thank Councillor Bartley for his second question and first question. Through you, Your Worship, to Director Victoria, due to the devastation out in our neighbor, Chatsworth Township, east, south, and southwest of the hamlet of Massey. According to Mayor Scott Mackey, in his words, there's a lot of cleanup to do. I was just wondering, first of all, has our Public Works team been contacted for help in the cleanup? And if that should happen, are we in a position to offer some assistance? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Greenfield, and through your worship. I'm not aware that we have been contacted to help the Township of Chatsworth at this point. After big storm events, we have a lot of cleanup of our own to complete, and definitely has been underway today, but could definitely look at helping if Chatsworth is in need of some additional manpower over the next couple of days or week if they do reach out. So definitely a possibility depending on what they're looking for.
Tori, and over to you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. A question for Tori as well. And I appreciate that Councillor Bartley has brought forward comments on Miller Street Hill. I was just going to ask Tori, do we have any early indications at this point of readings from that speed monitor? And secondly, where would the speed monitor be moved to next?
Through your worship, I don't have data for Miller Street at this point, but I can pass along data that was collected previously, if you give me 1 second. And I can follow up on the next location. I'm not 100% sure offhand where it is moving, but I can provide that update to council, as I know we have a number of locations that we still haven't utilized those signs that are on the list for them to be utilized. Let me see if I can. I don't know if offhand I can find the Miller Street data, but I do know that in 2019 and 2020, when we did do municipal-wide traffic counts and speed collection, Miller Street Hill, or that section of Miller Street, did have the most significant speeding within the urban area that was recorded within that time period. Obviously, traffic flows do change, but the traffic counts as well were quite significant, with over 1,700 cars per day traveling on that roadway, which obviously is very narrow and has difficult sight lines with the hill. So definitely a higher concern location within our municipality that we hope to be able to do more with, especially based on the recommendations in the Transportation Master Plan.
Thank you for that, Tori. Any follow-up to that, Deputy Mayor? No.
Thank you, Worship. No, I'll just look forward to any updates that Tori can provide to us via email when she has more data.
Okay, thanks. And I'm seeing nothing further from Council. Sorry, Councillor Kentner.
Thank you, through your worship. A two-part question for Mr. Armstrong. Firstly, do we know whether ratepayers have received answers to the questions they raised at the public planning meeting with SkyDev on May the 17th? And do we have any kind of target date for an open in-person public meeting on the SkyDev project?
Yeah, through your worship, I know that the developer is still looking at the comments from the public meeting. They met with Imagine Meaford. They intend to meet in person with some of the immediate neighbors. From there, they're going to finalize their plans based on that consultation, get them to the municipality, and then we'll be into a public meeting. I anticipate probably in September, so we're hoping that it can be an in-person meeting at that point in time.
Okay. All right, Rob, thank you for that. I'm not seeing anything further from council. And so we'll move on then to 7 and 7.1 consent agenda on our agenda. These items we have seen before. We have 5 items to consider and as one in a consent motion. And I will talk about them first. COR 2021-35 is the recommendation that the council approve the deferral of the Harbour Fuel project until 2022. B is COR 2021-36 is the recommendation that council authorize the transfers up to $43,500 from the Harbour Reserve Fund to fund additional costs incurred for the upgrades of the Harbour River washroom. And the second part of that recommendation is to approve the award of tender to for the Harbour River washroom upgrades to Imperial Construction and Restoration for $153,220.03. C is COR 2021-37 is the recommendation that council include an infrastructure renewal fee for unconnected lots fronting municipal water and wastewater services as part of the 2022 water and wastewater budgets, and to develop a policy and communication strategy to levy an infrastructure renewal fee for unconnected lots fronting municipal water and wastewater services by no later than September 30th, 2021. D is the recommendation that the council of the municipality of Meaford receive the 2020 audited financial statements and year-end report as prepared by BDO Canada. And E is the bylaw 2021-51 is a bylaw to enter into an agreement with 1204 Bloor Street West Inc. for cash in lieu of parking with respect to 16 Berry Street, and that be taken as read first, second, and third time, and finally passed. Are there any of those items that council wish to pull? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The very first item on the harbor fueling.
Okay, thank you. I did see another hand.
That was me, Your Worship, and I was going to pull the same.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Greenfield?
And that's the item I wanted to pull, item 8.
Okay. 3 for A. And nothing further, then I will ask for a mover and a seconder for B, C, D, and E. Councillor Bell and Councillor Kentner. All in favor of that motion, and that is carried. So we'll go back to COR 2021-35, the Harbour Fuel System Deferral. And I'm assuming, Councillor Bell, that you will move that. And could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Greenfield? Okay. And you wish to speak to that, Tony, yep. Councillor Bell? Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The last time we had the meeting with this discussion, I was very pleased with the remarks from our treasurer, because I was very concerned that we would be in a financial position that we might not be able to accomplish this very needful item. And our treasurer gave a remark. I wanted to put some money aside right now, but I just wanted, if we could have a reconfirming of the comments, that as time progresses on, this council will still be in a really good financial position, that whenever this goes back out and whatever transpires with time passing and contracts and so on, I just need to hear one more time for really solid confirmation that we will be in good position financially, that we will be able to take care of this situation, and that we will be able to make sure we get some fuel, particularly the upcoming season next year. Thank you.
Okay, and over to you, Rob.
Yeah, so thank you, Your Worship. One of the things I will note in talking with Rod Willis this morning, I'm happy to report that we will be, we're very close to finalizing a temporary solution with Richardson's Boats, where they will be bringing in temporary tanks and they'll be able to continue on with that fuel delivery. So that was really good news, because I think that was our biggest concern, is what is the interim. I think from a financial perspective, this money that we had budgeted this year will still be there. It's there in reserves. I think looking forward to next year, we'll look at what the potential costs are and whether we have to just add additional out of next year's budget to top it up, or whether we're fortunate and the prices come down and it can be within budget at that point in time. We just don't perceive that's a problem going forward. I think deferring it is probably the best thing and allow us to properly financial plan for it.
Thank you, Rob. Councillor Bartley?
I think Matt had a top up, Your Worship.
Sorry.
Matt, sorry.
Sorry, Your Worship, if you wouldn't mind. I think the other thing I'd just add to Rob's comment there from the financial point of view is that council gets to set which our financial state is. And so if when we need to budget in the fall, we need to budget more money, that's council's choice at that time.
Thank you for that reminder. Councillor Bartley and then Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, but Rob answered my question. I was wanting to know how negotiations were going to get fuel this year.
Okay. Then you preempted his question, Rob. Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Rob, I'm happy to hear that some type of compromise has been arrived at this year. But now you mentioned, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Richardson's are going to be able to provide some tanks, fuel tanks for this year. Now, here again, wearing my gray conservation hat, are these tanks going to be above ground? Are they going to have barriers around them in case of leakage? Like, where does the drinking water act come in, and risk management policies concerning these tanks?
Yeah, through Your Worship, obviously it will have to be in adherence with any legislation, which includes source water protection in any design. Again, I just heard about this morning, that we do have a deal. I don't know any of the details, except there's some temporary tanks that will be placed beside their building. But as I said, any fueling has to be in accordance with all legislation. So, but we will confirm that it will be in accordance with the source water protection for sure.
Sure. Okay. Are there any further? Oh, and Rod, you have appeared.
Yeah, I'm here, Your Worship.
Did you want to make a comment?
No, I think Rob summed it up fairly well. You know, we did explain that we were after the temporary tanks. Now, Richardson's, you know, are currently in a contract, and they currently have a license for providing fuel. So this is why they were able to secure the temporary services through their provider. And he is 100% right. It is above double-lined wall, above ground tanks that will be stored beside his facility. They need to be 2 meters off his facility. We did the drawings up actually for Richardson's when I was working with them last week. We are, you know, a good 10 meters away from the water. The hoses and everything will be on a reel, so it'll be, you know, retracted back to the tank each time. So, yeah, I was glad to hear that they were able to, you know, move forward with this. And again, we have been working very closely with them to assist them in any way.
Thanks, Rod. Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess my questions have to do, I kind of have two questions here. One, so these tanks that have to be brought in temporarily and this hose and the reel and stuff, obviously there'll be some costs incurred by this. Will those costs be incurred by the municipality, or will they be incurred by Richardson's?
So through Your Worship, we have been working with Richardson's. You know, it was a full intention of the municipality to be providing this service for this year. I have expressed with Richardson's directly that the municipality will assist with some of the expenses. You know, it was unfortunate we weren't the ones that were able to secure the fueling system for the year. So yes, we are working with Richardson's on the cost sharing.
And if I could ask another question, Your Worship?
Go ahead.
Will these funds end up coming out of reserves? And I realize that Treasurer Darcy isn't here today. You know, will those funds come out of reserves? And if they do, does anybody know offhand what those reserve funds might be? What total we'd be able to dip into those funds? And I realize that if the question can't be answered, maybe it could be wait till the next council meeting if Treasurer Darcy isn't here. So I don't know whether you have those answers, Rob, or not.
I don't personally, just Rod. Sorry.
Sorry, I can help out. Any additional costs for this year's fueling that I've been working with Richardson's will come directly out of the operating budget as a contracted service that we will do. I don't anticipate them being extremely expensive. As for the reserves, I'm sorry, I'm unaware of what reserves are in the account for that.
And kind of where I was going with that was, you know, we're worrying about funding for next year. Is there money available? Because to tell everybody or to make sure everybody knows where I'm kind of at in this, whether we had the money in reserves to pay the extra $200,000 or not, I didn't feel that it made good business sense to, just because we have the money sitting in a reserve account doesn't always mean we should spend it. So that was the reason why I wasn't prepared to go ahead with just pulling this money out of reserves at the last council meeting. But it would be interesting to know how much money is in that account if it has to be dipped into for next year's budget, or to make sure that this operation can occur, that we can get our pumps into the harbor. So.
Your Worship, I think, as Matt indicated, that will be part of the consideration by council as part of the 2022 budget. I think getting some comfort from Rod that what we're doing here will come from the current operating of this year to cover off those costs to continue the temporary situation until we can get the more formal thing in place to deal with it. So.
Through you, Madam Mayor, there is currently, as of the end of 2020, $256,000 in the Harbour Reserve. However, from that, I cannot confirm whether that's already been pre-allocated to other projects or being spent this year as well.
Thank you, Matt.
Okay. Councillor Kentner, you were next? No, I'm sorry, I missed that. And then it's Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you again. And just briefly, through you to Rod. Rod, do we have any idea of a timeline on the arrival of these tanks? Are we looking at a week or two? I hope we're not looking at much more than that, because believe it or not, the summer is starting to slip away.
Through your worship, Councillor Greenfield, I am unsure of the exact timeline. When I was speaking with Richardson's last week, their fuel provider actually has a very good working relationship with TSSA, and that's where a lot of the drawings and the applications were going. They didn't feel that it was going to be too long of a process to get going, but unfortunately, I just can't give you the exact answer.
Okay. No further questions from council? And then I will call the question. All in favor of this recommendation as presented for the deferral? And that is carried. Council, we've been sitting for over an hour. Do we need a break? No, yes, yes. All right, 5 minutes. We will return at 2:28. Thanks, everyone. Very prompt. All right, we'll move on now to 7.2 items for consideration. And the first one we have to consider, Bylaw 2021-52 is the H1 removal and site plan agreement for 170 Cedar Avenue. Could I have a motion, a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table? Councillor Vickers and Councillor Bartley. We've read the report from staff. Are there any questions or comments from staff on this one? Generally a housekeeping motion. Okay, seeing none, no discussion on this, I will call a question. All in favor of this recommendation moving forward, and that is carried. Thank you. And B is COM 2021-12 is a lease agreement. The recommendation is that it's a bylaw to enter into a lease agreement with the Sauble Conservation Authority and the town of the Blue Mountains regarding the Christie Beach Road agreement. And I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table. Councillor Vickers and Councillor Kentner. And I'll call any questions for staff on this one. Deputy Mayor.
Your Worship, thank you. Mr. Armstrong or Troy, I'll ask you. I'd hoped to get a chance to drive down to Christie Beach, and I didn't get there this weekend, but I wondered two things. Is there still a parking area left then for residents that would be a free of charge area for anyone to park who wanted to use the beach there? And secondly, I wondered, how was the nominal fee arrived at of $100? Where does that figure come from? Thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I can deal with both of those. The nominal fee first. Contracts used to be that your nominal fee would just be $1. I think it's fairly recognised and it's become fairly standard that $1 doesn't mean an awful lot these days, so they tend to become $100, and so that's really why that's there. It's just as a placeholder more than anything else. In terms of the parking itself, Council's already passed a parking bylaw that included provisions for the east side of Christie Beach, the west side, sorry, of Christie Beach Road, that made that resident parking only for the properties that were on the first section of Barker Street. So there would not be any free parking at all, because we had many complaints last year about parking along Christie Beach Road, and our staff had to spend an awful lot of time managing that. The point of this will be to give the parking responsibility over to Sauble so they could manage that appropriately.
Do you have a follow-up for that, Deputy Mayor?
No, that explains my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything further? Questions for staff? Councillor Bartley.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. And Matt, are they going to punch the road allowance further in and build a parking lot in there? Is that their intent?
No, there's no intent to do anything different down there. Our staff are currently replacing the culvert that goes from the corner down towards the water, but it will remain as is under the current plan. And then they will just be able to sort of manage that parking in that area as it currently exists.
So the parking would be on the road allowance, not on Christie Beach Road or Parker Street?
That's correct.
Parker Street. Okay, so my question would be, can the residents of Meaford, with their parking pass that they can get at City Hall, can that evade them from paying the Sauble parking? If we're going to give up we're going to give up our road allowance, why can't we do that?
Because, well, as always, council can do just about whatever it wants, though that would be particularly complicated if you did pass this lease, because you established a paid parking program for Memorial Park only. and this lease agreement, if it was to go ahead, would make this no different to Bognor Marsh or Inglis Falls, all of which Conservation Authority, where they charge for parking already.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bartley. I'm not seeing any further questions from council. So I will call the question. All in favor of passing this recommendation as presented? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and that is carried. Thank you. The next one is DEV 2021-32 is a heritage permit, part 2. So for 141 Sykes Street North, the recommendation is that the council of the municipality approve part 2 of heritage permit H04-21 for 141 Sykes Street North with the following conditions. Modifications to the dormer windows to be reflective of the rectangular windows in the remainder of the house. B, fish scale siding on the side of the dormer, and C, the porch railing at the front to be consistent with the turret railing. And number 2 is to defer the remaining works, including the cladding of the garage and second story, the railing at the rear side of the house, and the color palette of the windows and trim until further information is provided. And I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table for discussion. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Kentner, thank you. And open it up for questions of staff. Councillor Vickers.
Just wondering what happens if we kind of pass the first part of this permit, but then the second part doesn't get completed. Is there any kind of recourse upon this, or what kind of happens at that?
Through your worship, so this is, I don't know if that's really a risk of he's anxious to get going and continue to fix. I would say that the majority of concerns that were presented from council, the removal of the brick and possible impacts on the actual dwelling, they've been all resolved. They were put in place. So those initial public concerns have been looked after. This is just more facilitating it going on. I guess if he proceeds with work in violation of the heritage permit, then we would have to take the necessary action in that regard. But I think this is just facilitating and continuing on and doing the work that he would like to do with the building insurance complies with our Heritage Conservation District plan.
Thanks, Rob. Anything further on this one? Very straightforward. Okay, with that, I will call the question. All in favor of the recommendation as presented. And that is carried as well. Thank you. Moving into Committee of the Whole, I need a motion to move into Committee of the Whole. Mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Greenfield, Councillor Bell. All in favor? And that is carried. And our first one is with Community Services, COM 2021-13. It's an agreement, automatic deed agreement with the town of Blue Mountains. The recommendation reads that the Committee of the Whole recommend Council of the Municipality of Meaford enact a bylaw to enter into an automatic aid agreement with the town of the Blue Mountains. And I need a mover and a seconder. Put that on the table, please. Councillor Bartley, Councillor Kentner. Okay, and we'll call for questions of, I guess, Rob or Matt on this. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I guess it would probably go to Matt. Matt, I read on page 183 that the town of Blue Mountains does not respond to medical calls to their fire department. Is that out of the ordinary for the fire department not to respond?
I'm actually going to defer that to our new chief, and I believe this is his first appearance before council. So I will introduce Chief Allen, who is joining us now, and he will give you a far better answer than I can about what fire departments do or don't do.
Welcome.
Well, get the chance question one more time. I apologize. I was writing something down in my notepad, so I'd rather know the question full out so that I can answer it correctly.
Can you repeat the question?
Good day. It's nice to meet you, Mr. Allen. I read that the town of Blue Mountains Fire Department does not respond to medical calls. Is that out of the ordinary, or is there a lot of fire departments don't do that?
So a fire department gets to decide what it does and doesn't do. Depending on where we are in the province, Alberta, BC actually have firefighters that are paramedics. In Ontario, obviously, it's a different service. It is not uncommon for fire departments not to respond to medicals if they have a good medical, like a good ambulance response within their area. But for the majority of Ontario, firefighters do respond for medical calls.
Do you have a follow-up for that, Councillor Bartley?
Well, so the town of Blue Mountains, they must have a good ambulance service higher than the rest of Grey County, or?
They must be. So they must be very happy with their paramedic service.
I think, Councillor Bartley, that one of the things that might make a difference for them is that they have additional services permanently stationed at the Blue Mountain Village, I believe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Any further questions? Very good report. Obviously, no questions of staff on this. I see no further question, no hands raised, so I will call the question. All in favor of the recommendation as presented. And that is carried as well. Moving on to corporate services, COR 2021-39 is an award of tender. The Committee of the Whole recommend that the Council of Municipality of Meaford approve the award of tender INF-TS-2021-08, supply and delivery of various fuel and oil products to 941-2401 Heating Limited. At Brian's Fuel at a tendered cost of $306,015.66 in year one. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table? Councillor Bell and Councillor Greenfield, thank you. And again, open it up to questions of Matt or Tori, I guess at this point. Tori? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to ask Tori if there's any sort of flexibility built into this contract, considering it's a 5-year contract, and I know we're moving into the lease of our vehicles, and I don't know whether we would have potentially then the option to have more diesel or more gas vehicles, and 5 years is quite a long time, and I know we may look at some electric vehicles within that time frame. So I just wondered if we're really tied into the number in this particular contract, or if there's an opportunity to make changes should our fleet change within that time frame.
Through your worship, thank you for the question. So the tender is worded in such a way that they are all of the quantities are estimates, so that a fair bid can be provided by all of the bidders. They are based on our historic usage, but yes, obviously things change. Sometimes those go up and down. Actually, since the previous contract was awarded, we have changed our snow removal shifts by adding additional ones, which has been caused an increase in usage over that contract. So we received more fuel than was originally in the contract, but there's definitely ability for us as those are just estimated quantities.
Thank you, Tori. That was a good question, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and to Tori. The report also spoke about other fluids, so I'm assuming that that's all the fluids that our fleet's going to need, like hydraulic fluid or transmission fluids or other items that are needful in fleet management. That's what that would allude to?
Through your worship. So what that does allude to is bulk oil. I am not the most up on fleet, and I definitely rely on my staff to know more, but in talking with them this morning, there definitely are other fuel or other products that we utilize and budget for separately in our budget annually that we still will require. But these bulk oils will no longer be required to be budgeted for separately. They'll be in this contract instead. So there's just more of our current budgeted fluids that will be in this contract over the next 5 years.
Thank you, Tori. Any further questions on this? And I'm not seeing any, so I will call the question. All in favor of this recommendation as presented, and that is carried as well. Moving on to Development Services, DEB 2021-33, that the Committee of the Whole recommend that the Council enact a bylaw to acquire a portion of land to be added to the 22nd side road to facilitate a turnaround within the road allowance. And I'm noting that Deputy Mayor has excused herself from this discussion, but could I have a mover and a seconder to put this on the table, please? Councillor Kentner and Councillor Bartley, thank you. And I will open it up for questions of Rob. No questions? Councillor Bell.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. So reading the report and the surveyors that went through and found this discrepancy, Mr. Armstrong, is this something that is actually because of the, well, the age of some of our surveys on some of the areas that maybe municipal staff weren't surprised, but I was a little surprised when we found such a deviation. If you could just speak a little bit about that deviation from the surveyor.
Yes, through your worship. So this obviously would have been the original township survey back in the 1800s that was done. And obviously the technology and that of surveying back in the day, especially when you're surveying within heavily treed areas and deep ravines, not unusual for them to get a bit of an offset, I guess, between the concessions. Probably the first time I've personally seen it, but not surprised that it didn't happen way back. And you really don't know it until you get updated surveys as we have in the Devon situation. So I think we were able to resolve, come to an amicable resolve on dealing with this and get the proper turnaround, and they're amicable to that. So I think this is a good path forward, through your worship.
Thank you, Rob. Councillor Greenfield. You're muted.
Try that again. Okay, thank you, Your Worship, and thanks, Rob. I think when we take into consideration, this was almost, well, 1840s, and you consider tramping through the forest with some chains, compared to some of the horror stories I've heard about GPS systems, I don't think they did too bad a job.
No.
Okay, thanks for that. And I see no further questions for Rob, so I will call the question. All in favor of this recommendation as presented, and that is carried. Okay, and Deputy Mayor, I'm not sure you can hear us, but we're moving into updates from members. And maybe Margaret has alerted you that this item has, there you are, back in with us again. Thank you for that. So we'll move on to updates from members. And their appointments to committees and so on. And we'll begin as usual with County Council.
Thank you, Your Worship. County Council did meet at the call of Warden Hicks on June the 24th. During the announcements portion of the meeting, it was really great to hear that Bill Abbott, who we've seen at our council several times, was honored with a Senior of the Year award for his many years of volunteering in the town of Blue Mountains. And we know that Bill has been instrumental in advocating for cycling in our community and beyond. And he certainly spoke to council eloquently in regards to the paved shoulder project on Frogs Hollow. So congratulations to Bill. Members of County Council heard an extremely well-composed report from the residents of Kimberley, who are concerned about the amount of and speed of traffic traveling through their community. Martha Rogers presented a very detailed plan with suggestions of lowered speed limits, a crosswalk, and a graveled pathway along their county road. Council agreed with her statement that safety is a social determinant of health. It was agreed that Grey Highlands and the county would work with the residents of Kimberley to implement as many of their recommendations as possible. Tim Lanthier and Jennifer Stevens presented on behalf of the Grey Sauble and Saugeen Valley Conservation Authorities, and we heard that same presentation here at our council today, so I won't speak to that. The major discussion at County Council surrounded the presentation of a conceptual plan for the future of the Wireton Keppel Airport, located in Georgian Bluffs. The goal is to determine whether there is council support for pursuing a business case for making this 400-acre facility a regional airport. There was a discussion about a flight school, new runway, hangars, and even a hotel. The reality is that the airport currently operates at an annual loss of $350,000 to the taxpayers of Georgian Bluffs. Many councillors were not enthused, as there are two other airports, Saugeen and Billy Bishop, within Grey County, that would not be receiving similar investment. In the end, it was decided to defer further consideration of the matter until staff had the opportunity to determine the likelihood of any support from Bruce County and the Township of South Bruce. So I'll update council again when we discuss that further. In March of 2021, Grey County conditionally offered to purchase 40 acres in the municipality of Grey Highlands as the site of the new Patrol D depot. Recently, the county was advised of the historic significance of the adjacent Black Pioneer Cemetery and of strong objections by members of the community to siting a depot next to it. Out of respect for the difficult history and the ancestors buried there, staff recommended no further action be taken towards the purchase at this time. Staff will begin the search for another suitable property for the new Transportation Depot D. And that was really it for me, Your Worship, unless you wanted to add anything.
No, and I had to leave early from that meeting, so my apologies to all for that, but you covered that very well. Thanks. The next one we have on here is our Wellbeing Statutory Advisory Committee, and I'm pleased to report on that. Happened the same day, and that was one of the reasons I had to leave the county meeting at 3 o'clock. That county meeting went on over long that day. So this is the culmination, I guess, of our Statutory Advisory Committee work, and I want to make a particular commendation for Hannah McCullough, who has worked so hard and so diligently to prepare all of the documentation and to bring all of this information together for the perusal of this advisory committee, and therefore their recommendation going forward. So she presented the draft plan framework for discussion. We've gone through the 5 areas of focus, and the draft plan framework is what will then be the report that will come to council for further action, for approval and further action. She also encouraged participation in this presentation to council from committee members, which I thought was really, really well received by committee members. And we'll have 2 members responding at that time. Perhaps more will join us as this plan comes before council. One of the concerning issues that was discussed at that meeting was a reluctance with some of our, because it is a health issue, and it also speaks to a number of other issues that have been discussed through the safety and wellness plan. And that is that a number of our vulnerable citizens who are somewhat disadvantaged, in fact, a lot disadvantaged in many cases, are very reluctant to get the vaccination. This is a real concern with the increase and the spike that we've been seeing of late in the in new cases coming forward, and they're specific to the Delta variant, which is highly, highly contagious. Many of these folks live in very crowded conditions and are just simply reluctant to take advantage of offers for vaccination. So it is a concern. It has been communicated to the health unit, and I know that with the offer of a second and perhaps more clinics in our area, this might help to address that issue as well. But we'll follow up with that for sure. The second one that I wanted to just give a quick update on is the Joint Municipal Physician Recruitment and Retention Committee, which met on June the 17th. And at that time, we had first a presentation by Dr. Lease, who is the Chief of Staff of the Collingwood Marine Hospital. And he very strongly encouraged this committee to focus on supporting other programs, including a research and innovation project that is delivered through ROMP, which is the Rural Ontario Medical Program, rather than a physician recruiter. So he strongly supported the recommendation and the decision that this council had made in our previous council meeting not to support the hiring of a physician recruiter through this particular committee. So I did present this statement on non-support of this activity, but time on the agenda prevented further discussion on what topics might be included in a strategy to address primary care access. So that will be forthcoming, hopefully at another meeting. So I will open it up to other council's members if they have anything to report. Councillor Vickers. And Councillor Bartley.
Through your worship, I was wondering if I could ask you and Deputy Mayor a question about the County Council.
Sure.
So it has to do with our own bridges 22, I do believe it is. And my question is, will the county be, since Bridge 22 and 21 are predominantly agriculture bridges, I wondered if that question would, or that subject would go before the Ag Advisory Committee before it goes to County Council as a whole. And I didn't know whether anybody would have, Deputy Mayor, I do believe you're the chair of the Ag Advisory Committee, and I didn't know whether that subject would go before the committee, before going to the whole.
I can speak to that, Your Worship, with your permission. Yes, I'm a member of the Ag Committee. I'm not the chair of it, but I was present at the last meeting. And I did have conversation prior to the meeting with our county clerk and had requested the ability for our own local agricultural committee led by Stefan Tremblay to make presentation at that meeting. But we were past the deadline, so that wasn't able to happen on that particular date. The next date for our Ag meeting is in September. And we believe that there's still time to make a presentation from our local committee at that particular meeting. It has been a letter sent to Grey County. We haven't seen anything in our agendas yet in relation to Bridges 21 and 22, but I expect that, well, hope anyway, that we will see a report coming to County Council sometime during July or August. And we'll have presentation at that meeting and keep doing what we can to move that project forward.
Okay, thanks for that, Joey. And I did see, I thought, yes, Councillor Kentner.
Through your worship, a follow-up to Councillor Vickers' question. Is there anything that you and the deputy mayor, could use from us as council to strengthen or support your arguments at county council on structures 21 and 22?
Back to you, Deputy Mayor.
Your worship, thank you. I appreciate the question, Councillor Kettner, and I would suggest that if this council did pass a resolution in support of going forward with those bridges, that would be valuable for us to have when we went forward to discuss this at County Council.
If I could comment, Madam Mayor, just to say that Council has a couple of times now passed that resolution of support, and so we will be providing all of that information to the county. So I don't think that there's any particular need to do that again. Though obviously if Council wants to, they can.
Thank you, Matt. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I too want to comment on what the Deputy Mayor said at County Council. Georgian Bluffs made the decision to buy the airport from South Bruce Peninsula. So I doubt very much that South Bruce Peninsula is going to give any financial help in running it. And I don't believe Grey County should be given help to running it. That would be like Meaford asking Grey County to help us run our hall, our regional hall. So just that's my 2 cents worth. If it means anything when you go into County Council, I don't think it is a county responsibility. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Your Worship, and I really appreciate those comments, Councillor Bartley, because that was generally the gist of the discussion, was that we agree there's lots of potential for that airport, and it could be of great value to Bruce Power, for example, but at the meeting, Bruce County hadn't participated in any discussions to know if they were even interested in backing any upgrades there financially. So it certainly was the feeling of County Council that they didn't wish to go forward with a major investment in this particular location at this time, at least without knowing that there'd be support from Bruce. But my sense is that you're exactly right, that it's very difficult to pick one project in one lower tier and not be supporting, because every lower tier has great things going on, and it's pretty difficult to step out and support one. It'll be an ongoing conversation.
Particularly where that one project was in the northern part of Grey County, and the southern and other parts of Grey County were feeling that the distance was a disadvantage to them, but a particular advantage to South Bruce. So that was certainly prevalent within the conversation as well. Councillor Kentner.
Thank you, through your worship. A little off topic, but I just, at this point in the conversation, it's worth mentioning, I think, that it's really unfortunate that the Grey Bruce area has two excellent airports in the north end that are both struggling mightily. And I think that should be a considerable concern to us in the municipality of Meaford that one of those is located right in our municipality and offers a lot of benefits to our municipality. And yet the owner, the city of Owen Sound, is at this point in time quickly losing interest in it. So that's something that concerns me, and I think should concern all of us. Thank you.
Councillor Kentner. Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Very quickly on the BIA front. I know, Madam Mayor, you listened in at the last meeting, and you will confirm that there was a lot of work and there's ongoing work with the Friday afternoon market. And I said at that time, there's a lot of work on behalf of a lot of people making this event come together. And in no small part, the work of Janet, our staff member, who has been a tremendous liaison between the BIA and the municipality, how to make this event happen. And Madam Mayor, you'll recall I said that they pull this off, they make it happen, and they'll be the silent heroes making something for the quality of life being improved here in our municipality. So I just wanted to say a big thank you at this council for the hard work of all the members of the BIA and staff member Janice Burling.
Thank you for that. There were three markets that took place on over the weekend and on Friday. Has there been any feedback at all from the members of BIA, Councillor Bell, on how they went?
Madam Mayor, I have not been sent any information, nor has anybody called me on that to give you an answer on that. Thank you.
Okay, anything further from council? And seeing none, I will ask for a motion to move out of committee of the whole. Councillor Bartley. And the seconder, please, Councillor Kentner. Thank you. All in favor? Thanks very much. 304. So moving into number 9 on our agenda item, do we have any notice of motions coming forward? Councillor Bartley and Councillor Kentner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And would this be where I bring up?
It would be where you bring it up, yes.
So I would like to, as a person that voted down Harley's motion, I would like to table it again. So would that be for the next meeting, Matt, or can we deal with that this meeting?
Well, we have to have a 2/3 vote of, again, to reconsider, and then it would come back at the next meeting.
Okay.
So you're moving that a motion of reconsideration of the motion presented at the last meeting. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Kentner. Is there any discussion that needs to occur at this stage before I call the vote on this, on the reconsideration? Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, fellow Councillor Bartley. I'd be happy to vote to have another conversation about Miller Street Hill.
And Councillor Greenfield?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Smith. Would the notice of motion be brought back as it was 2 weeks ago, or could there be fine tuning done to it, or does it have to be per se as it was 2 weeks ago?
Through you, Madam Mayor, if council wishes to reconsider it, it has to be the motion that you considered previously. That is, of course, nothing to say that council can't make amendments when it is being considered again at the next meeting.
No further discussion? Then I will, and we need a 2/3 majority. So 4 members.
5, Madam Mayor, 5 you would have to have.
Thank you. Can't count either. Councillor Kentner.
Thank you, Your Worship. So through you, I just encourage everyone to consider some further discussion on this. I feel that it's a very, very important subject. And I just feel that it is well worth our time and consideration, and hope that we get a 2/3 majority here to have that discussion. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Bartley, you had a comment?
Yes, I have reconsidered this, and with Tory has sent us all the information on the counts on all the roads, and clearly Miller Street Hill is a serious problem, and I would like to re-talk about that. Thank you.
Okay. So this is a motion to reconsider the motion to reduce the speed limit on the Miller Street Hill. We require 5 members of council for a 2/3 majority. And with that, I will call the question. All in favor of reconsideration of this motion? 2, 3, 4, 5, and that is carried. So this motion then will come back in its entirety as it was presented the first time at next council meeting. Okay, there are no motions for decision, and so we'll move into the adoption of the minutes for the council meeting of June the 14th. Councillor Kentner, sorry.
I do beg your pardon, Madam Mayor. I would like to bring forward a notice of motion as well.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Sorry. Please go ahead.
And that will be I had intended this 2 weeks ago. So it would just be to look at the transportation master plan and in particular Pearson Street and Ridge Road.
Okay. And Deputy Mayor, did you have a motion as well?
Your worship, thank you. Yes, I was going to bring a notice. We had the presentation from Tom Thwaits, and my motion will involve his request to waive the $70 boat launch pass for 2021 and 2022 with the funds to come from Council's community budget.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anything further? And my apologies, I missed that step of it anymore there. I'm not seeing anything further, so we will now move on to adoption of the minutes with the council meeting of June the 14th. Could I have a motion, please, to put that on the table? Councillor Greenfield, Councillor Bartley. Are there any comments, questions on, yes, Councillor Vickers?
When I was reading through the minutes, I noticed that there was a couple of different spots where there wasn't actually a named person that makes the motion and a seconder. And I just wondered, I don't know whether I was confused about something, like it's not like for our staff to make any misses. So I was a little bit confused.
Through you, Madam Mayor, just a simple mistake, I'm afraid. We'll fix it.
Thank you, Matt. Good catch. Any further questions on this set of minutes? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor of them as repaired. Thank you. That is carried. And the closed meeting of June the 14th, 2021. A mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table. Deputy Mayor, thank you. And Councillor Bartley. And are there any questions? We will have to go into closed if there are questions or discussion. Then all in favor? And that is carried. Is there anything on the communications list that council would like to pull for discussion? No. And I see nothing coming forward. So we will move on to a confirming bylaw. Be it resolved that bylaw 2021-54, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Municipality of Meaford at its regular meetings held in the month of June 2021, be taken as read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. Could I have a mover and a seconder to put that on the table, please? Councillor Kentner, Councillor Bartley. Any comments, questions on that? Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. And that brings us to the end of our prepared agenda. And I want to thank everyone for your participation and your questions. And note that we are declaring an adjournment at 3:12 this afternoon. We have time to get out and play in the sunshine. Thank you all for attending. And we will see, or at least talk to you maybe at Canada Day through the virtual performance that will be going on. Have a great weekend, everyone.